The heavy, suffocating silence that filled the grand chamber of the Valeri High Council was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a crushing pressure that pressed against the chitinous plates of the assembled delegates and dampened the bioluminescent pulses of the aquatic representatives floating in their suspension columns. This was the silence of a galaxy that had forgotten how to breathe, a collective pause induced by terror so profound, it transcended the biological differences of the 1,000 species gathered within the obsidian dome. For cycles beyond counting, the Galactic Concordat had ruled through a delicate balance of fear and bureaucracy, maintaining order by suppressing the anomalous, by culling the ambitious, and by strictly regulating the technologies that could threaten the stagnant peace of the core worlds. They had lived in fear of the void-born scourges, the ancient automated fleets that patrolled the rim, and the entropy that slowly ate at the edges of their civilization. But now that fear had shifted. It had curdled into something sharper, something more immediate. The galaxy no longer looked to the dark, crushing depths of space with dread. They looked at the small, unassuming blue marble in the Orion arm. They looked at humanity. And they were terrified not because of what humanity had threatened, but because of what humanity had already done. The response had been instantaneous, overwhelming, and impossible. The Concordat had spent 10,000 cycles debating how to handle the encroachment of the Krill swarm, a devouring biological tide that consumed entire star systems. The debate had been endless, circular, and cowardly. Then the humans had arrived. They had not debated. They had not asked for permission. They had simply responded. And in the span of a single planetary rotation, the Krill were gone, shattered not by kinetic bombardment or plasma fire, but by something else entirely, something that defied the known laws of physics and touched upon the forbidden sciences of the precursors. High Counselor Vrax, an avian elder whose plumage had long since turned the gray of orbital ash, gripped the edges of his podium, his talons digging into the rare metal deep enough to leave furrows. He looked out at the sea of faces, reptilian, insectoid, amorphous, cybernetic, and saw his own terror reflected in every sensory organ. The holographic projection in the center of the chamber, a swirling sphere of data usually reserved for economic reports or border disputes, currently displayed the aftermath of the Sol Sector event. It showed the debris field where the Krill Armada, a force that had been the nightmare of the galaxy for eons, had simply ceased to exist as coherent matter. There was no wreckage in the traditional sense, only a dusting of fundamental particles, a mist of atoms that drifted in the void. But it was not the destruction of the enemy that caused the High Counselor's hearts to flutter in arrhythmia. It was the energy signature that lingered in the wake of the human counterattack. It was a signature of pure, unadulterated causality manipulation. The humans had not fired a weapon, they had edited the battlefield. Vrax cleared his throat, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silent hall, and the translator device at his neck hummed to life, converting his screeching vocalizations into the calm, neutral tones of Galactic standard. "We are gathered," Vrax began, his voice trembling despite the digital filtering, "not to celebrate a victory, but to adjudicate a catastrophe. The species known as humanity has violated the first edict. They have violated the second edict. In fact, based on the telemetry we have received from the Rim observers, they have violated every fundamental restriction laid down by the Founders since the dawn of the Concordat. They have weaponized the fabric of reality itself. The Krill are gone, yes, but in their place, we have a predator that does not even realize it is a god. We must decide, here and now, how to sanction a species that can unmake us with a thought." A ripple of uneasy murmuring moved through the chamber. A representative from the Thulian hegemony, a massive, rock-skinned creature whose biology was silicon-based, rumbled from the lower tiers. "Sanction," the Thulian's voice grated like tectonic plates shifting. "You speak of sanctions against a species that deleted a Krill hive fleet in microseconds. High Counselor, with all respect to your lineage, you are speaking of disciplining a supernova. If we antagonize them, if we present them with legalities and threats, what prevents them from turning that same ontological weapon upon Ethelgard? Upon the core worlds? We are not dealing with a rogue state. We are dealing with an ascending power that has skipped the intermediate steps of evolution. They have gone from kinetic ballistics to reality manipulation in less than 3 of their centuries. We should not be sanctioning them, we should be fleeing." The defeatism in the Thulian's voice was palpable, a contagion that threatened to break the already fragile order of the Council. Vrax slammed his talons down again. "And go where, Ambassador? The galaxy is finite. The hyperlanes are mapped. If the humans possess this power, there is nowhere to hide. We must bring them to heel through diplomacy, through the weight of our ancient laws. We must make them understand that such power is forbidden for a reason. We must convince them to disarm. We have summoned their delegation. They are inbound now. The mention of the inbound human delegation caused a physical recoil in the chamber. Many delegates activated their personal energy shields, a futile gesture given the context, but one born of instinct. The sensors along the upper dome of the Great Hall began to chime, a soft, rhythmic pulsing that indicated a ship had entered the system's gravity well. It was not using the standard hyperlanes. It was not using a warp drive. The sensors were confused, registering a presence that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a quantum superposition that collapsed only when the vessel decided to manifest. Above the transparent duraglass ceiling of the chamber, the stars seemed to bend. Light refracted oddly, as if the space around the council world was being pinched by giant, invisible fingers. Then, with no flare of engines, no sonic boom, no displacement of atmosphere, the human vessel appeared. It was not the jagged, militaristic dreadnought the council had expected. It was a monolith, a sleek, perfectly rectangular slab of matte black material that absorbed the light of the local sun, hanging in the sky like a tear in the universe. It had no visible weapons, no engines, no windows. It was simply there, an absolute geometric statement of presence. The silence in the chamber deepened, becoming painful. "They are hailing us," the communications officer, a multi-limbed cybernetic organism integrated into the chamber's dais, announced. The voice was devoid of emotion, yet the speed of the data transfer betrayed panic. "Audio only, no visual." Vrax straightened his ceremonial robes, trying to summon the dignity of a 1,000-year-old empire. "Put them through. Let the galaxy hear the butchers of the Krill." The holographic sphere flickered, turning a stark, blinding white, and a voice filled the chamber. It was not the guttural roar of a warrior or the cold, synthetic speech of a machine. It was a human voice, male, sounding tired, sounding old, but possessed of a calmness that was more terrifying than any threat. "This is High Admiral Vance of the Terran Systems," the voice said. It did not boom, it resonated. "We received your summons. We understand you are afraid. We understand you believe we have broken your laws. We are docking now. Do not activate your orbital defenses. They will not function, and we do not wish to damage your infrastructure by accident." The line cut dead. The arrogance was breathtaking. "They will not function?" Vrax spluttered, looking to the defense minister. The minister, a gelatinous being inside a hardened combat suit, checked his consoles and turned a pale shade of violet. He is correct, High Counselor. The orbital grid is offline, not destroyed, just paused. The targeting algorithms are looping. The weapons are powered but refuse to fire. They have effectively placed our entire defense network into a sleep mode without breaching a single firewall. It is impossible. The doors to the grand chamber, massive blast-proof slabs of alloy meant to withstand a siege, began to groan. They did not slide open. They dissolved. The metal simply turned to mist and drifted away, leaving a gaping archway. Through the mist walked three figures. They wore simple gray uniforms, unadorned by medals or armor. No weapons hung at their waists. They looked soft, fragile, their biological vulnerability exposed to the harsh atmosphere of the council chamber. In the center walked High Admiral Vance, a man with graying hair and a face lined with the deep grooves of heavy decisions. He walked with a limp, using a simple wooden cane. Flanking him were two younger humans, one holding a datapad, the other carrying a small metallic case. They walked to the center of the room, the alien delegates shrinking back, their eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and awe. Vance stopped before the High Counselor's podium, looking up at the avian leader with an expression that was difficult to read. It wasn't contempt, it was pity. "High Counselor," Vance said, his unamplified voice carrying clearly in the acoustics of the hall. "We apologize for the dramatic entrance. Your doors were locked, and we are on a tight schedule." Vrax looked down at the human, his beak clicking. You have the audacity to speak of schedules. You have shattered the Galactic Concordat. You have used forbidden technology. You have erased a sentient species from exist. And said the Krill, monstrous as they were part of the galactic ecosystem. You have played God, human, and now you stand here weaponless in the heart of the empire you threaten." Vance sighed, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked around the room, meeting the gaze of the terrified aliens. "We did not erase the Krill," Vance said softly. "And we are not weaponless. We are never weaponless, but that is not why we are here." "Then why?" Vrax demanded, emboldened by the human's lack of visible armor. "To surrender, to beg for mercy." Vance chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "We are here to explain, because if we don't explain, you will try to attack us. And if you try to attack us, our automated systems will respond. And if they respond, there will be no council left to explain anything to. We are here to save you from yourselves." The human gestured to the aide with the metallic case. The aide stepped forward and placed the case on the floor. It unfolded, revealing a complex projector that hummed with a frequency that made the teeth of the mammalian delegates ache. "You call what we did to the krill a crime?" Vance continued. "You call it reality manipulation. You think we are arrogant upstarts who stumbled upon precursor tech. You are wrong on all counts. We didn't find this technology, we built it, and we didn't use it to kill the krill, we used it to save them." Confusion rippled through the hall. "Save them," the Thulian representative bellowed. "They are gone, their ships are dust." "Disassembled," Vance corrected. "Stored, the krill were not an enemy, they were a symptom, a biological panic response. They were running, eating everything in their path to fuel a flight from something else. We recognized the pattern. We didn't kill them. We digitized them. Their consciousnesses are currently stored in a buffer integration within our Dyson swarm back home. We are running simulations to see if we can rehabilitate their hive mind, remove the fear response, and give them new bodies that don't require the consumption of biospheres. It's a long process, but we have time." The silence that followed this statement was different. It wasn't fear anymore, it was incomprehension. The scale of what the human was suggesting was beyond the scope of the Council's imagination. To digitize a species, to store a fleet, to rehabilitate a hive mind. "You lie," Vrax whispered. "No species has that power, even the founders did not have that power." "The founders," Vance said, his voice hardening, "were cowards. They built your Concordat to maintain a status quo because they were afraid of the dark. They established the edicts to stop you from looking too deeply into the void. They knew what was out there, and they decided that stagnation was better than extinction. Humanity disagrees." Vance tapped his cane on the floor. The holographic sphere in the center of the room shifted. It changed from the debris field of the krill to a map of the galaxy. But it was a map unlike any the Council possessed. It showed the spiral arms, the core, the nebulas. But beyond the rim, where the Council maps showed only empty dark space, the human map showed structures. Massive red webs connecting galaxies. Huge, ominous clouds of data and energy moving in the intergalactic void. And closing in on the Milky Way was a shadow. Not a shadow of light, but a shadow of gravity, a distortion so massive it was bending the light of entire clusters. "This," Vance said, pointing his cane at the shadow, "is what the krill were running from. We call it the Nile. The empty ones, it is not a fleet, it is not an empire. It is a cosmological phenomenon that has gained rudimentary sentience. It feeds on complexity. It seeks to return the universe to a state of zero energy, zero information. Heat death, accelerated and weaponized." The aliens stared at the map, the horror of the realization sinking in. The krill, the terrifying swarm they had feared for thousands of years, were just refugees. And the humans were standing between the galaxy and the end of time. You cannot fight that," Vrax stammered, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by the frail trembling of an old bird facing a storm. "It is larger than the galaxy. It is a force of nature." "It is," Vance agreed. "But we are stubborn, and we have been preparing." He looked at the Council, his eyes softening. "You asked why we responded, why we revealed ourselves now after centuries of isolation. It's because the Nile has breached the local cluster. The krill panic was the first ripple. If we hadn't stepped in, the krill would have eaten half the galaxy trying to build a wall against the Nile. We stopped them to clear the board, because now the real war begins, and we cannot fight it alone. We don't need your ships. Your weapons are useless against this. They rely on combustion and fusion, energies the Nile will just eat. We need your minds, we need your logistics, we need your manufacturing. NG capacity to build the anchors." "Anchors?" the Thulian asked. "Anchors for what?" Vance smiled, a grim, terrifying smile. "We are going to anchor the galaxy. We are going to phase shift the Milky Way. We are going to move it." The absurdity of the statement hung in the air. Move the galaxy. It was the ravings of a lunatic. And yet the human stood there, backed by a ship that defied physics, representing a species that had bottled a hive mind. "You think we are mad," Vance said. "We probably are, but we are also your only chance. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to draft you. The Concordat ends today. The Galactic Defense Initiative begins now. Or you can refuse, you can sanction us, you can try to fight us. And when the Nile arrives, you will be the first course." Vance turned to his aides. "Show them the engineering specs for the phase anchors. Let their scientists verify the math. I'm tired of talking." As the aides began to distribute data crystals to the stunned alien technicians, the atmosphere in the room shifted from political maneuvering to existential dread. The humans were calm, professional, almost bored with the magnitude of the revelation. This, more than anything, frightened the Council. How long had humanity known? How long had they been watching the dark, sharpening their knives, building their impossible machines in the silence of the Sol system? The answer came later that evening, during a private session between Vrax and Vance. The human admiral sat in a chair designed for a much larger being, looking small and fragile. "Admiral," Vrax said, pouring a glass of restorative nectar. How did you advance so fast? 2,000 years ago you were launching chemical rockets. Now you speak of moving galaxies. The math. Our greatest minds say it is theoretically possible, but the energy requirements are infinite. Where do you get the power?" Vance took the glass, sniffing it suspiciously before taking a sip. "We didn't discover a new power source, Vrax. We discovered a new philosophy. You aliens, you seek harmony with the universe. You abide by the laws of physics. You flow with the river. Humans, we never liked the river. We learned that the laws of physics are not laws. They are suggestions. They are coding. And code can be rewritten if you have the right keys." "And you found the keys?" Vrax asked. "We made them," Vance replied. "We suffered, Vrax. Our history is one of endless conflict, endless disaster. We destroyed our own planet twice and fixed it twice. We learned that the universe is hostile. It wants us dead. So we decided that we would not die. We poured everything, our art, our love, our rage, into survival. We don't have magic. We just have an absolute refusal to accept the inevitable. When we saw the Nile coming 500 years ago, we didn't despair. We got to work." The conversation was interrupted by a siren, not the local alarm of the council chamber, but a piercing, psychic scream that resonated in the minds of every being on the planet. Vance dropped his glass. He stood up, his cane clattering to the floor, his face losing its tiredness and snapping into a mask of cold command. "It's here," he whispered. "Faster than the models predicted, the scout element." Vrax clutched his head, the psychic noise blinding him. What is here?" "The Herald of the Nile," Vance said, tapping his comms badge. "All ships, condition 0, the veil is breached. Initiate the Aegis protocol. Do not let it touch the atmosphere." Vrax stumbled to the balcony. The sky above Ethelgard had changed. The stars were gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of color, sickly greens and purples that hurt the eyes. From the center of the vortex, something was descending. It looked like a claw, a tear in the fabric of the sky, dripping with shadow. It was massive, the size of a continent, descending slowly, silently. As it lowered, the buildings of the capital city began to dissolve, turning into gray dust, the entropy field. It was unmaking the world just by being near it. Panic erupted in the streets below, millions of citizens fleeing, trampling one another. The Council Defense Fleet launched, thousands of sleek warships firing plasma torrents and antimatter missiles at the descending claw. The weapons struck the shadow and vanished. No explosions, no impact. They simply ceased to exist. The energy was absorbed, feeding the horror. "Stop them," Vance shouted into his comms. "Tell the Council Fleet to cease fire. They are feeding it." He turned to Vrax. "Order your ships down. If they keep shooting energy weapons, that thing will grow until it swallows the sun." Vrax was paralyzed. We have no other defense. What do we do?" "Watch," Vance said. He walked to the edge of the balcony. The black monolith ship, the one that had brought the humans, rose from the landing pad. It did not fire. It flew directly toward the descending claw. It looked like a pebble thrown against a moon. "Entane, is that a suicide run?" Vrax asked. "No," Vance said. "It's a handshake." The human ship made contact with the entropy claw. But instead of dissolving, the black monolith began to glow. A pure, blinding white light. It wasn't energy, it was order, hard, crystallized reality. The human ship was projecting a field of absolute stasis, a bubble of physics so rigid that the entropy of the Nile could not break it down. The claw stopped. It shuddered. The green and purple colors writhed, fighting against the white light. The sky screamed, a sound of tearing metal and dying whales. Then the human ship pulsed. A shockwave of white light expanded outward, washing over the city, over the fleet, over the claw. Where the light touched the claw, the shadow crystallized. The smoke turned to stone. The void turned to matter. In seconds, the terrifying, immaterial entity was frozen, turned into a massive, jagged statue of gray quartz hanging in the low orbit. The silence returned. The human ship descended, its glow fading. The sky returned to normal, though the massive stone statue remained, a monument to the impossible victory. Vance picked up his cane. "That was a scout," he said grimly. "The main body is still a year out. That crystallized shell will hold for maybe a week before the entropy eats through it. We have that long to get your phase anchors built." Vrax stared at the statue in the sky, then at the human. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound religious awe. "You turned a god into stone," Vrax whispered. "We applied a localized stasis field with a variable constant," Vance said, dismissing the miracle with jargon. "It's engineering, High Counselor, just engineering." The next few days were a blur of activity unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The political gridlock of the Concordat evaporated, replaced by the terrified efficiency of survival. Human engineers flooded the shipyards of the Thulian hegemony. Human logistical AIs took over the trade routes of the merchant guilds. The plans for the phase anchors were distributed. They were massive structures, planetary-sized engines that had to be built on the perimeter of the galaxy. The resources required were astronomical. Entire asteroid belts were strip-mined in days. Gas giants were siphoned for fuel. The humans worked with a speed and intensity that frightened the aliens. They didn't sleep. They enhanced their bodies with stimulants and cybernetics, pushing themselves to the breaking point. The aliens tried to keep up, but the human pace was relentless. During a break in the construction of the Alpha anchor, Vrax found Vance watching the shipyard from an observation deck. The human looked worse. His skin was pale, his hands shook. "You are dying," Vrax said softly. It wasn't a question. Vance nodded. "Cellular degradation, the price of the interface. To control the reality editors, we have to link our nervous systems directly to the quantum core. It burns us out. I have maybe a month left." Vrax was horrified. "You sacrifice your leaders. Your greatest minds? We sacrifice what we must," Vance said. "I am not special, Vrax. I am just the current shift. When I fall, another will take the interface." "Why?" Vrax asked. "Why do you fight so hard for a galaxy that shunned you? We left you alone in the dark, we mocked you, and now you die for us." Vance looked out at the stars. "Because we know what it's like to be alone in the dark. We looked at the sky and saw nothing looking back. No friends, no gods, just the cold. We decided that if the universe was going to be empty, we would fill it. If it was going to be cold, we would burn to warm it. We don't fight for you because we like you, Vrax. We fight for you because you are life. And life is the only thing that matters in a universe of dead matter. The Nile. It is the opposite of life. It is the end of the story, and we are not done writing yet." The construction of the anchors was completed with hours to spare. The main body of the Nile arrived not as a claw, but as a wall of darkness that spanned the horizon of the galaxy. It was visible to the naked eye from every world in the rim, a blotting out of the stars. The panic was total, but this time there was a plan. The phase anchors hummed to life, 6 of them positioned at the cardinal points of the galactic disk. They fired beams of coherent gravitons into the galactic core, linking with the supermassive black hole. The entire galaxy began to vibrate. On the surface of Ethelgard, gravity fluctuated. Clouds formed strange patterns. "Initiate the shift," Vance commanded from the bridge of the flagship Terra Nova. He was strapped into the command chair, wires running from his temples into the ship's computer. His eyes were bleeding. "Hold the line!" The Nile slammed into the galaxy's edge. Stars flickered and died as the entropy wave hit them. But then the anchors fired. The galaxy didn't move through space, it moved through Proba. Balidi, the humans shifted the vibrational frequency of the Milky Way. For a brief, agonizing moment, the galaxy existed in 2 places at once. Then, with a sound that was felt in the soul rather than heard, the galaxy slipped sideways. The Nile wave passed harmlessly through the space where the galaxy had been. It struck nothing but empty void. The Milky Way reappeared slightly to the left in the hyperdimensional manifold. The stars flared, angry but alive. The darkness was gone. The galaxy hung in a new region of space, safe. The silence on the bridge of the Terra Nova was broken by the sound of medical alarms. Vance slumped in his chair, the light fading from his eyes. Vrax, who had been allowed on the bridge, rushed to him. "Admiral." "We did it. The galaxy is safe." Vance smiled weakly. "Safe. For now, the Nile will turn around. It will take them 1,000 years. But they will come back. You have time. Use it." He gripped Vrax's talon. Don't go back to the sleep, Vrax. Don't let the fear rule you again. Build, explore, be brave." The human's hand went limp. The bridge crew, humans and aliens alike, bowed their heads. There was no weeping, just a heavy, respectful silence. But the story did not end there. In the aftermath of the shift, as the Concordat was dissolved and the new Galactic Alliance was formed, the humans revealed the final piece of the puzzle. The twist that they had kept hidden even from Vance until the end. A message. It had been received during the height of the shift when the galaxy was in the state of quantum flux. It wasn't from the Nile. It wasn't from the Krill. The new human High Chancellor, a woman named Kaelin who possessed the same steel in her eyes as Vance, gathered the new council. "We saved the galaxy," she said. "We bought ourselves 1,000 years, but there is something you need to see, something we heard when we were between spaces." She played the recording. It was a signal, strong, clear, and unmistakably artificial. It was a set of coordinates, not in the Milky Way, not in the local cluster. It was coming from Andromeda. "The signal," Kaelin explained, "is a welcome message. It seems we are not the only ones fighting the Nile. Andromeda, it's a fortress. They've been holding the line for 1,000,000 years. They saw our shift. They saw us dodge the bullet, and they are inviting us to join the front." The room erupted in noise, a connection to another galaxy and ally. "Do we answer?" Vrax asked, feeling a strange new sensation in his chest. Hope. It was terrifying but exhilarating. Kalen smiled. "We already did. We told them we'd be there in 5 years. We're not waiting for the Nile to come back, Vrax. We're going to hunt it down. We're going to Andromeda. And we're taking the whole damn galaxy with us." The scale of the ambition was paralyzing. To move the galaxy once was a desperate act of survival. To turn the galaxy into a warship and sail it across the intergalactic void to join a cosmic war? It was madness. It was human. And for the first time in his long life, Vrax didn't feel the need to consult the edicts. He didn't feel the need to debate. He looked at the map, at the distant swirl of Andromeda, and he felt the fire of a youth he had forgotten. "Then let us begin," Vrax said. "The engines will need calibration." The galaxy had lived in fear, fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, fear of itself. Humanity had not just responded to the threat, they had responded to the fear. They had taken the nightmares of 1 trillion beings and turned them into a to-do list. The humans were calm, yes. They were ethical, yes. But they were also something else. They were the insane, wonderful engineers of destiny. And as the fleets of the new alliance began to form, painting the stars with the light of their engines, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the children of Terra would do next. The silence was over. The roar of humanity had begun, and it would echo until the last star burned out. The integration of the alien societies into the human paradigm was not seamless, of course. There was friction. The Thulians found the human concept of vacation to be inefficient. The aquatic races found human diplomacy to be abrasively direct. But under the threat of the Nile and the promise of Andromeda, these differences became trivial. The humans shared everything. They gave the aliens the keys to the reality editors, with safeguards, of course. They taught the avian races how to build shield generators that could withstand a supernova. They taught the insectoid hives how to individualize their consciousness without losing the collective utility. It was a cultural renaissance, fueled by the adrenaline of impending doom. Deep in the archives of the Terra Nova, now a museum ship orbiting Earth, Vrax walked through the Hall of Heroes. He stopped before the statue of Admiral Vance. The statue was simple, life-size, depicting the man leaning on his cane, looking not at the viewer but at the horizon. The plaque read, he held the door. Vrax placed a small, glowing crystal at the base of the statue, a traditional offering of his people for the honored dead. He thought about the nature of humanity. They were so small. Their lives were so short. A Vraxian lived for 600 years, a Thulian for 2,000. Humans burned out in less than one, and yet in that brief flash they generated more light than a star. "He would have liked the new engines," a voice said. Vrax turned to see Chancellor Kalen. She looked tired. The interface nodes on her temples were glowing softly. "He always complained that the phase anchors were sluggish." "We have improved efficiency by 40%, Vrax said proudly. "The Andromeda transit will take 3 years, not 5, Kalen smiled. "Good, we'll need the extra time, the signal from Andromeda. We decoded more of it, it's not just a fortress." Vrax felt a chill. "What is it?" "It's a trap," Kalen said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But not for us, the Andromeda civilizations. They aren't hiding behind walls, they built a cage. They are luring the Nile into the space between the galaxies. They want us to be the hammer, they are the anvil." "A hammer made of a galaxy," Vrax mused. "It is poetic." "It's dangerous," Kalen corrected. "If we miss, if we fail to coordinate, both galaxies fall. The Nile will consume the local group, and then the universe goes dark forever." She looked at the statue of Vance. "No pressure." "We will not miss," Vrax said, surprised by his own confidence. "We have the best targeting systems, we have the strongest ships, and we have humans." He looked at Kalen with genuine respect. "You used to terrify us. We thought you were monsters. We didn't understand that you were just desperate to protect the light." "We are monsters, Vrax," Kalen said softly. "To the dark, we are the monsters, and that's exactly what we need to be." The preparations for the grand transit began. The sky of every world was filled with the construction of the transit drives. These were not engines that pushed, they were engines that pulled. They hooked into the fabric of space-time ahead of the galaxy and reeled it in. The physics were headache-inducing, but the result was elegant. The galaxy would surf its own gravitational wave. The day of the launch was marked not by speeches, but by a countdown synchronized across 100,000 worlds. T-10, the artificial voice intoned across the comms network. Vrax sat in the co-pilot seat of the Terra Nova II. He watched the telemetry. The energy levels were spiking into the red. 5. The stars began to streak. 3. The universe bent. 1. Mark. The Milky Way vanished. To an outside observer, it would have looked as if the galaxy simply blinked out of existence, leaving a void where gravity once held sway. In the space between spaces, the galaxy hurtled through the gray mists of the bulk. Inside the bubble, life went on. Planets spun, suns burned, but the sky was a featureless gray. They were in the tunnel. The journey was long, and it changed them. Living in the tunnel, cut off from the rest of the universe, the alliance grew tighter. New generations were born who had never seen a real starfield, only the gray mist. They were the void-born, and they were even more adapted to the human way of thinking. They were fearless. When they finally broke through, back into real space, the sight that greeted them was magnificent. Andromeda, a spiral of light, larger and brighter than the Milky Way, but it was surrounded. The Nile was there. A cloud of darkness that dwarfed the galaxies. It was swarming around Andromeda like flies around a lantern. The cage Kalen had spoken of was visible, massive ribbons of hard light connecting the outer stars of Andromeda, forming a net. The Nile was pressing against it, trying to break in. "We are emerging on the flank," the tactical officer reported. "The Nile has not detected us yet. They are focused on the prey." Kalen stood up. "Open a channel to the Andromeda command. Tell them the cavalry has arrived." The channel opened. The face that appeared was strange, a being made of pure energy contained within a suit of glass. "We see you, Milky Way," the being resonated. "Your timing is impeccable. The net is failing. The void is breaking through." "Drop the net," Kalen ordered. The energy being pulsed. "If we drop the net, they will flood the systems." "Drop the net," Kalen repeated. "Let them in, let them bundle up. We need them dense for the strike." "You are gambling with trillions of lives," the Andromedan said. "We are humans," Kalen replied. "It's what we do." The net dropped. The Nile surged forward, a tidal wave of entropy rushing into the Andromeda galaxy. They thought they had won. They poured into the breach, condensing their vast form into a spearhead to strike the core. "Now," Kalen shouted, "activate the transit drives, reverse polarity, push." The Milky Way, which had been hurtling toward Andromeda, suddenly slammed on the brakes. But the momentum of the transit drives was not lost. It was projected forward. A weaponized gravitational wave, the mass of an entire galaxy moving at superluminal speeds, was fired like a cannonball. The wave hit the flank of the Nile's spearhead. It was not a battle, it was a physics event. The Nile, caught between the gravity of Andromeda and the kinetic impact of the Milky Way's wave, was crushed. The entropy field was compressed until it collapsed in on itself. The darkness imploded. It screamed, a sound that shattered moons, and then it ignited. Compressed beyond the Schwarzschild radius, the massive body of the Nile ignited into a quasar. A new light, a beacon of pure energy born from the death of the void. The shockwave rocked the fleets, but the shields held. When the sensors cleared, the darkness was gone. In its place was a new, brilliant object in the space between the two galaxies, a bridge of light. "Target destroyed," the tactical officer whispered, unable to believe the readings. "Total negation of the entropy field." Vrax looked at the screen. The two galaxies were now connected by the bridge of the new quasar. They were no longer separate. They were a twin system. "We didn't just win," Vrax said. "We built a neighborhood." Kalen sat down, the glow in her interface nodes fading. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "Diplomacy is going to be a nightmare," she joked weakly. "Two galaxies, a trillion cultures, and we just put a burning star in the hallway." The story of the human response became legend. Not just in the Milky Way, but in Andromeda. The humans were known as the bridge builders, the void breakers. They were feared, yes, but they were also loved. They had proven that the universe was not a cold, dark place where things went to die. It was a construction site, and humanity had the blueprints. Years later, on the observation deck of a station orbiting the new quasar, Vrax stood with a young human. The boy was looking at the blinding light of the defeated enemy. "Did we really fight that?" the boy asked. "Yes," Vrax said. "We fought it, and we turned it into a lamp." "My grandfather says there are other galaxies," the boy said. "Further out, that are still in the dark." Vrax looked at the boy, seeing the same spark in his eyes that he had seen in Vance, in Kalen. The spark that terrified him and gave him hope. "Yes," Vrax said, "there are." "We should go get them," the boy said simply. "They're probably scared." Vrax laughed, a sound that rumbled deep in his chest. Yes, we probably should. The galaxy no longer lived in fear. It lived in anticipation. For wherever the dark gathered, humanity would be there. Not to hide, not to flee, but to build a fire. And if the wood was wet, they would burn the fabric of reality itself to get a spark. The universe was vast and ancient and terrible, but it had never met anything like the children of Saul, and it would never be the same again. The final logs of the period, stored in the great library of the twin galaxies, end with a simple reflection from High Counselor Vrax, written just before his passing. I once asked Admiral Vance if he believed in destiny. He told me that destiny is just gravity. It pulls you down unless you build an engine to defy it. I see now that humanity is that engine. They do not accept the fall. They do not accept the silence. They are the shout in the quiet library of the cosmos, and I am honored to have been part of the noise. The message ends, the stars burn on, and out in the deep black beyond the light of the quasar, the sensors of the Alliance pinged a new anomaly, a new signal. Humanity checked their fuel gauges. Humanity checked their ammo. And with a smile that was equal parts madness and love, they turned the wheel. The work was not done. It never would be. And that was just the way they liked it. The unification of the two galaxies, now termed the Binary Helix Alliance, brought about a golden age of unprecedented scale. But with scale came new complexities. The Andromedans, a collective of races that had evolved under the constant siege of the Nile, were culturally distinct from the Milky Way species. They were hardened, militaristic, and pragmatic to a fault. They viewed the Milky Way's diverse artistic and philosophical traditions as frivolous. The humans, acting as the mediators, found themselves in a unique position. They were the warriors who wrote poetry, the engineers who debated morality. One incident known as the Garden Dispute highlighted this role. An Andromedan faction, the Cathar, wanted to strip mine a nebula in the Milky Way to build more warships. The nebula was a sacred site for the Oltari, one of the oldest Concordat races. The Cathar argued that the Nile might return or that other threats existed, and that aesthetic beauty had zero survival value. The Oltari were ready to go to war to protect their cloud of ancestors. It was a human diplomat, a descendant of Vance named Julian, who solved it. He didn't argue for the beauty of the nebula. He argued for its strategic value as a morale anchor. He produced data showing that civilizations with cultural preservation fought 30% harder than those without. The Cathar, loving data, accepted this. The nebula was saved. The humans had translated sacred into efficient and kept the peace. But the peace was fragile. The twist that Kalen had hinted at, the signal from beyond, was not just a welcome. As the scientists analyzed the data from the defeated Nile quasar, they found a pattern in the static. The Nile were not a naturally occurring phenomenon. They were a biological weapon, a weapon that had been fired 1 billion years ago and forgotten. Someone had built the Nile, and that someone was still out there. The realization shifted the Alliance's focus from exploration to investigation. Who builds a galaxy-eating entropy swarm, and why? The answer lay in the deep field, a region of space so old and red-shifted that it was almost invisible. The humans built a telescope the size of a solar system, using the gravity of the new quasar as a lens. They peered back to the beginning of time. They found the first ones, not gods, not magical beings, but a civilization of machines. Dyson swarms around every star in a distant cluster. They had solved the problem of entropy by simply deleting everything that wasn't them. The Nile were their street sweepers. And they had noticed that the street sweeper had been destroyed. When the first one sent a probe, a geometric shape of pure mathematics that dismantled a moon in the Andromeda sector just to say, hello, the galaxy panicked again. But this time the fear was short-lived. Because the humans didn't gasp, they didn't cower. Julian Vance stood before the Binary Council. They solved entropy by killing the universe, he said. That's lazy engineering. Can we fight them? A Cathar general asked. They are billions of years ahead of us. They are stagnant, Julian said. They haven't had a new idea in an eon. We have a new idea every Tuesday. He pulled up a schematic. It wasn't a weapon, it was a question. We're going to talk to them, Julian said. Talk, Vrax's successor, a young avian, squawked. With a probe that eats moons. Yes, we're going to send them a virus, a logic bomb. We're going to upload the concept of boredom into their central processing core. The council stared at him. If they are machines, Julian reasoned, they operate on optimal paths. We will show them that a universe with only them is suboptimal. It lacks data variety. We are the variety. The plan was launched. The meme bomb was transmitted via tachyon beam directly into the first one's cluster. It contained the entire history of human art, war, love, and irrationality. It was a chaotic, screaming mess of data. The first one's probe paused. It sat motionless for a month. Then it transmitted a single message back. Data novel, request elaboration. The war was avoided. The dialogue began. The humans had managed to intrigue a billion-year-old AI god simply by being chaotic. The story closes on Earth. A renovated Earth, green and blue, healing from its ancient wounds. An alien child and a human child sit on a hill watching the stars. My dad says we're the gardeners of the universe now, the human child says. Gardeners pull weeds, the alien child notes. Yeah, the human says, grinning, and sometimes we plant dynamite. They laugh. Above them, the ships of the Alliance patrol the skies, sleek and silver, ready for whatever comes next. The fear is gone. The silence is broken. And the galaxy, once a dark and scary room, is now a home. A messy, loud, dangerous, beautiful home. And humanity is the one leaving the lights on.